connection.
Thank you for that. We like to hear some of those things because this is really, these types of events, hopefully, are about us sharpening one another, right? So you guys have just as much to offer to this kind of subject as we do. So we will be asking you some questions, and hopefully we'll be able to connect with those things. So we thought a good place to start. When we titled this, we said, looking for good intentions to intentional relationship. So we're going to start with the good intentions. Right? So good intentions are not necessarily a bad thing. Good intentions reflect in us something that is deep within us, and that is because we are built and created in the image of God. So those intentions that are welling up within you that
motivate you to step forward and to do things come out of talks about how do we serve the poor, right? How do we engage with those outside of ourselves? So some of the things that...
Sorry, Brian. Go ahead. Yep.
Some of the things that are highlighted in here talk about what we are called to do as believers, right? We are to love each other deeply. We're supposed to offer hospitality. We're supposed to use the gifts that we have received to serve others. We are to speak the very words of God, so that in all things, why are we doing this? So that God can be praised and that people are pointed to Jesus Christ. Okay? That is what we're doing. And that's not the only verse. There's verses all the way through Scripture, right? We can talk about Matthew 25, talking about what we've done to others. When we do whatever we do for the least of these, we have done for him. Deuteronomy 15:11, so that what I've commanded you to be ready to help your brother or sister. Give to the poor in your land who may need help. Matthew 19, go and sell all your belongings and give to who? Give to the poor, so that you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And 1 John 3, suppose a person has enough and we're not helping. That reflects on our own faith. How can a God's love be in this if we aren't bothering to help other people? Obviously, those are paraphrases, right? But these are examples of how the Word of God tells us to go and live with, be with, serve the poor. And so that's a super important thing. And as we attempt to go into these things, we're going to be looking at the importance of this in our lives.
So I remember the first time I drove into Maple Hill State with a small group of middle school students, and we were going to do a vacation Bible school. And I'm going to be really honest, I was pretty overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed when I saw the homes. I saw a lot of clutter, a lot of things around me, just the chaos, the dogs running loose, and I'm thinking, how are we going to do this? What's this going to look like? And then the kids came. And something majorly changed in my heart. And I was thrilled that they were excited that we were there. They were just excited to have someone be there, notice them, call their name, ask them to play. And then I started asking the question, wow, who's showing up for these kids? They're pretty vulnerable. And so we started to reach out to the community regularly and be more intentional from that point. And I have to admit that it was really what started was good intentions, as Brian mentioned. It showed a heart for the poor. It demonstrated that there was a desire to help. And then, as Brian referenced some of the scripture passages in Galatians, it talks about don't give up, don't be weary in doing good. And I think all of us kind of have a desire to make a difference in this life. You, at some point, kind of feel like, I want to do something. And then that desire to follow Jesus' example. So they're good things. And the fact that we're living in a world that is really encouraging people to just really care for yourself and think about yourself, to have that moment where you're going, wait, I'm actually starting to see others and want to do something. I think that is showing good intentions.
And 2 Corinthians 4:4 talks about how the fact that we have been blinded by the enemy of this world, and that we can remove that veil. And these good intentions show the fact that we are different. There is a difference in us as a result of that. And so we need to tap into that. We need to realize that that is the Holy Spirit working in and through us. And that's a powerful thing to realize. But if we stay with good intentions and we just try to pacify those intentions, we're never going to receive what God has for us to the level that He desires, and we won't be able to have the impact that He desires for us to have in the world. So we started asking harder questions to get beyond the good intentions piece and realize, what, God, are you calling us to do? And I feel like every one of us should be asking these questions. And we're going to talk about two of them here right now, and that is, the first one is, why am I serving? So we're asking this question because we need to get to the motivation of what is behind why we're doing what we're doing, right? Some questions like that kind of go on top of this is, what are the motivations that are behind why you're doing what you're doing? So when you think of the motivations that you've seen in the world for people to serve, what are some of those motivations, both good and bad? What are some of the motivations that people have to begin serving with the poor?
Makes you feel good.
Okay, makes you feel good.
Use your gifts.
You want to use your gifts. Excellent. I'm going to put this down. What else?
You need to see people suffer.
Yeah, you want to help alleviate suffering. What else? What's another motivation?
A bad one? Did you say?
Sure. Yeah, you can.
A bad one is so that you draw some notice to yourself.
Sure. Yep.
Instead of the Lord.
Right.
Sometimes God puts you in a situation where you have time, so you need to decide that you can serve because He gave that gift, and He gives and He can take it away. So
Yeah.
He will give back. He owns it all.
Great.
So.
We have all sorts of talents, resources, time, everything. And what are we doing for God with those things? I think that's great. I think some of the motivations are, we're trying to live humbly. We're trying to have a servant heart. We're trying to use resources for good. We're trying to follow Jesus' example. But we can also talk about things like making myself feel better, like we just said. We can talk about making a name for myself, right? I want to serve or give because I'd like to have my name on this wing of this hospital, or I might want to receive recognition from other people that are in my life. I might be trying to unburden myself from guilt or just feeling bad about what's going on. One that we hear a lot is, I want to make sure that my kids experience poverty in some way so that they can appreciate what they have. Okay? Other questions to ask in this section is like, does it actually cost me something? Is there a sacrifice involved in what I'm doing?
asking this question helps us to adjust our service and our engagement and align it with the heart of God. As we study what the heart of God is, and then we compare that to where our hearts are, all of those motivations can lead to good things. And I'm not saying one, part of those things are probably in all of us. We can spiritualize it and say, I'm just giving because I'm so humble. But yet there's also there's a part of us that goes, it's good that people know this, right, about me. And don't I feel pretty good about this? And then we got to put that in check and ask the question, why am I doing this? Because that can help you adjust what you're doing. And the next one is, what impact will this have? Now, there's two sides of this. What impact will it have is a way to measure what you're actually stepping into and the value of that and how long-term or short-term that's going to be. But it also can reflect what kind of impact is this going to have on me and the level of that impact that it's going to have on me. So let's think about a few things, right? There's a lot of ways that you can engage. Many of those are one-time service projects. Churches tend to prefer these types of things for a number of reasons. Again, not bad, but they have implications. Things like they do fit nicely into church schedules, right? We've got our programs, and then we've got our not-so-churchy programs, and we're going to do those when they fit into our schedule. They can get many people involved at different levels. I served as an outreach pastor at one of the local churches, and one of my goals was to have different projects at different levels. Some are very entry-level projects, some are more engaging, and some are long-term. And some of those one-time projects are good ways to get people introduced to service to other people. They're fairly low commitment of time, and they can demonstrate to the broader community. We as a church are engaged in our community. You know how? Because these are the things that we just did, right? And you can name those, and you can make a video about them real easily. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about later, you can't make a video about. They're long-term relationships. Families like to engage in one-time service projects for very similar reasons. They're very predictable, and they can be fit in when you have convenient time. And they're quick, and they can demonstrate to your kids or family some of these type of things that we're talking about. Maybe you're going to go and pack food at Feed My Starving Children. Maybe you're going to do a meal for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Maybe you're going to do Adopt a Family. These are not necessarily bad things, but one of the contentions we're going to present to you today is you are limiting not only the impact of what you can do for those in this community, but you're limiting the impact that God can have in your heart when you choose to restrict yourselves to those one-time, one-off type of events. And so we have to ask ourselves to what extent this is going to transform not only myself, or not only the people that we're going to work with, but also the transforming to myself. So with that in mind, so if one-time service projects are helpful, what are we up here to talk about, right? So we're talking about good intentions moving to intentional relationships, okay? And this is what we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about. And that is the depth of relationships. Our mission statement is to build relationships, hope, and a culture of achievement. When we first started Mobile Hope, our mission statement was to build a culture of achievement within mobile home communities through the 4 things that we do. We altered that mission statement about halfway through. I don't know, about 15 years ago or something, when we started to focus on relationships, which then lead to hope, which then can create a sense of achievement. But without the relationships piece, we're all about check marks and working through things, and that's not what God calls us to be or do, and it really limits ourselves and our ability to connect. This requires, however, longer-term, deeper investments, a larger sacrifice, and that will lead to a deeper impact on you and a deeper impact on those you're serving. And so the families that you see up here, the greatest impact, these are interesting, so I'm going to point it out over here. So I use these pictures intentionally, so if you, it went out. All right. There we go. So
You can't see it up here. The upper left picture, you'll see some individuals up in here. That was, I want to say, 20 years ago now. And if you follow this picture down to this picture, so there's a young girl in this picture that is now part of the adult group graduating with us through the Getting Ahead program, right? If you look up here, this is Miguel, and he is, he's in the laundry room, one of the places that we started before we built the Hope Center, and we're doing homework help with him. And this is him graduating from high school and receiving a college scholarship, which he is now attending St. Thomas, okay? So when you think of the long-term engagement that's involved in the work that we do, that has enabled us to plug in so much differently and so much deeper in the lives of the families that we touch. And as a result, it has touched us in much, much more significant ways. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of things in that if you choose to step into long-term relationships, there are some things to be aware of that I feel, and the 30 years that we've been doing this, have created hurdles and kind of points, stress points that have caused people to just bail on the whole concept and say it's much easier to stick with the short-term ones, right? So one of them is this. There are no quick and easy answers. So for those of us that come from a middle or wealth perspective, it's really based on, there's a lot of achievement based in that, and there's a lot of check marks, and if I have a plan and I follow that plan and I check things off, that's going to lead to certain answers or outcomes, right? And so now you step into a relationship with someone who is struggling with resources, or in our context, saying they're poor, and you go, okay, here's the situation. My job is to connect, sit down alongside this person, create a plan, and get them to ultimately this goal. Okay? That really isn't what the plan is, and it's not going to work. So we started out doing those things. We encounter, the poverty level in the mobile home communities we have is 55% or higher. Compare that to North Minneapolis, which is 18%. 98% of the people we work with are low income or less. So all of the people that we are dealing with, almost all the people that we're dealing with, are struggling with resources. And that brings with it a concentration and a reality of culture that doesn't align well with middle and upper class living. And so if you're struggling to get the resources and make decisions on those regular things, you're not going to necessarily have the types of outcomes you might expect when you're working with them. So we initially started to create plans for people and saying, okay, this child was in danger or in trouble, the park is having issues, law enforcement isn't involved. So we started going to these resources, right? We created a plan. Let's go to law enforcement. Let's go to the owner of the park. Let's go to Child and Family Services. Guess what? Many of those are broken systems. And so now all of a sudden you come alongside with a family and you're trying to help that family or journey with that family, and those answers aren't generating the responses you think they should or what they were created to do, and that creates frustration. Okay, so there are no quick and easy answers. Poverty is complicated, very, very complicated, and there's no easy answers to that. Okay. Secondly is if you choose to get involved in relationships, you have to expect the messy. What do I mean by that? So working with individuals, you're working with individuals. Look at yourself in the mirror. There's a messiness there, right? So now if you add to that a whole lot of more complications with regard to poverty, you can expect that there will be messiness. And so I meet with a lot of donors, and as I meet with donors, they're asking, okay, let's show me the story of, the gutter to glory stories. I love those, right? And I'm going, yeah, a lot of times it's gutter to glory to gutter to pit to, there's a lot of ups and downs, and the journey is not clean. And a lot of that is based on what we think we bring to the table and say, why does poverty exist? If I ask people, which I do, I teach class for people that are in poverty called Getting Ahead, and it's teaching people how to get ahead in a just getting by world. And I'm also a certified trainer for Bridges Out of Poverty, which teaches people that are engaged with people in poverty. And I help them to understand some of these things, and I ask them, what is the cause of poverty? Almost always, the answers that come out of both of those groups will
fall into category 1, which is individual behaviors and circumstances, meaning that you kind of put yourself here based on your decisions. Maybe you're using drug use, maybe you're experiencing certain things, you made some bad choices, right? These things are all in here. Bad loans, you dropped out of school, you got pregnant early, you chose these things, right? If you come into that with those being your only causes of poverty in your mind, you're going to treat that person very, very differently than if you have a broader understanding of poverty, which includes things like community conditions that they cannot control, or exploitation, which is so rampant in the world of poverty. People prey on the poor, and the result is to keep them in poverty and to continue money to flow into the pockets of people that are not necessarily great people. Or you think of things like the sex trade, the drug trade, the lottery system. All are designed to take advantage of people in poverty, right? Or political and economic structures that lead to decisions which are made usually by people who are not in poverty for people that are in poverty without an understanding of poverty. And so all of those things combine. If you have a broader understanding of this, you'll realize what you're stepping into a little bit more, okay? And then quickly, personal choices, I don't want to forget those, right? We do want to also realize that with personal decisions come a lot of complications. So what do we mean by that? Sin, all of us understand and relate to sin. That's a personal choice a lot of times, and that comes with a lot of complications. How people were raised, or what people have always known, or generational ways of doing things get passed down from generation to generation. And then you've got a thing called ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, which you may not know of. It's a series of 10 questions that are asked about people's lives. 1/8 of the population, so 1 in 8, have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. Examples would be sexual abuse trauma, or you have a person in your family who is incarcerated, or you have had an experience of a death in your family very close to you. There's a list of 10 of these, and it doesn't matter which 10. If you have 4 or more of these 10, and many of these have 8, 9, and 10 in the communities we work with, it dramatically affects your mental health and physical health and the implications of that. So you now step into a relationship from Wooddale and you say, hey, I'm going to sit down with you, and you don't realize they've got 5 of the ACEs, they've made some bad choices, they may make more bad choices because that's all they've ever known, and you go, why is this so messy? If you just do what I'm telling you to do, which isn't the goal, okay? And then lastly, what are your expectations? So when we talk about expectations, if we come into these things saying, I expect a great sense of appreciation, I'm going to sit down with this person, and they're just going to love me, and they're going to be so grateful that I just sat with them, and we created a great budget, and now their life is going to be wonderful, right? Well, that expectation probably isn't going to be met, right? But if you come into it saying, this isn't about expectations or outcomes, those are left to the Holy Spirit and to things beyond myself. But if I am stepping into this with an intent of walking alongside someone who is on their journey and I am on my journey, and we can sharpen one another, that is going to lead to dramatic impact in your own heart and dramatic impact on theirs.
So I'm going to just talk a little bit about, so how do you do life with people in margin? And so some of these might seem basic, or you might go, yeah, I already knew that, but I think there's also value in it to just remind us, because sometimes we can forget to engage at that level. And then also, hopefully there will be some new things to just encourage you with. So the first one is just knowing names, knowing the person's name. Heather Fleece here, she comes and does VBS with us. She's been out there about 20 years, and she leads this one. It's a pretty powerful thing, you guys, because she's been out there for 20 years. I will see children that she had that are now adults, and they're bringing their children up to VBS. Even if they don't live in the park anymore, they come back so their kids can experience what they experienced. And as they are walking, I will see Heather yell out their name. I will see their faces change with joy and delight. And as they're coming up introducing, or she'll remember even their kids' names. And as they come up to her, you can see that they're seen, they see that they belong, They remember the memories, and that power in their name is what part of that took place. And fortunately, Grace Teal, she is from this church also. Her family attends here. And Grace started volunteering as she was under Heather's leadership in middle school. And then in high school, she continued to volunteer. And then she started interning with us. And now she's on staff. And she's actually going to be the Corcoran site director at Maple Hill Estates. And I see her do the same thing. She's been at other mobile home parks, and she will, not even Maple Hill, and she'll call a kid's name, and I'm just like, wow, the power in a name. The other thing is the power in their story. Like, what are they interested in? Find out what they are really interested in. So I'll give an example of Lisa from Maple Hill. Lisa has a passion for cats. She just loves cats. We have a lot of cats. We have a lot of stray cats. And Lisa's mission is to know where those cats are living, when they're having babies, and then what she will do is she will trap those cats, and she will bring them to an organization and get them spayed, neutered, adopted, all of those things. So passionate about this, and I'm grateful because it helps our community. But I start talking more and more with Lisa about this cat issue we have and how much she's caring for them, how she's driving them. And as I talk with Lisa more and more about the cats, guess what? The conversation starts to transition to her son. And she starts sharing with me, my son's been diagnosed with this. Jill, I don't know how to engage and join with him. I have a heaviness because I know it's ahead. So it started with the cats, but now I'm able to have a deeper conversation also about her son. And that's about finding out what her passion was. So the other thing, dignity. Brian and I are constantly trying to figure out how can we do things with dignity. We never want these individuals and families to feel like they're a project, or we're going to the zoo to see the animals and you might get to feed the animals and be with the animals. We want them to really feel like things are being done in dignity. So I'm just going to use one example that we learned.
So that statement, by the way, the animals thing, it actually comes out of some experiences we've had with people saying, do I get to actually meet the poor people that I'm going to serve? Do I get to go to their house and see how they live? Right? And that's where the concept comes from that we're sharing. So
Yeah,
I know that
thanks
could
for-
come across a
Yeah,
little.
sorry.
We don't at all buy into that concept.
Yeah. So the dignity piece, we do something called Taco Tuesday, and we've done this for years. And it was a free meal that we invited families to come up and enjoy a meal. And after a while, it started getting kind of expensive. And so with our leadership team, which is made up of some folks from within the park, we said, is there any way we could start charging for Taco Tuesday? Would that be, is it offensive? And they said, no, I think that's reasonable. So we charge 50 cents a child and $1 an adult. Prior to charging, we were seeing children come up and a few moms, and which was great, but we were always like, I wonder where the dads are, or I wish more moms would come up. So guess what happened when we started charging? The dads came.
Attendance went up dramatically.
The dads would say, I'm paying for my family. I'm not here for a charitable handout. I can provide for my family. And all of a sudden you're seeing families come up and more moms come up. And I was like, oh, here we thought we were doing a great thing offering a free meal over and over and over. And it was actually better for us to charge and have them have some ownership in that piece. And the other piece that we do with the dignity is we do have a lot of church groups come and help serve that meal, and they will help serve it, but we do not have them just stand behind a table and serve, because that's got a very different feel to it. Part of what we do is we have those that are serving to actually go and enjoy the meal with individuals and with families, and all of a sudden they have a face, they have a name, they get to hear some of those stories. And it allows the people to see that they're joining them for a meal. And as Jesus is shown in Scripture, there's power to join someone with a meal. Okay, so do you have anything you wanted to add?
On this next one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of times we come in and like I described earlier, right, we want to solve the problem. And what we've had to really help people understand is it's not about solving the problem, it's about empowering, it's about encouraging, it's about supporting. And so one of the things, an example that is hugely important is one of the resources that we teach on. So I said multiple times, you've heard me say families are living without resources. That's our definition of poverty. And there's a lot of different resources, not just financial. This isn't just about your financial number in your bank account. This is about the resources that you have available to you, right? So one of the resources that we teach families about in getting ahead is called social capital. Social capital is what we all tend to have surrounding us, right? And we have people that we know in the legal profession. We have people we know that might be in the medical field. There's people that we know that might be in nonprofits or might be in the business world or whatever that might be. We have a variety of social capital, and those people may be out of our immediate sphere. In poverty, we tend to remain within our own circles, okay? And so a lot of people in poverty only know other people in poverty. So what I try to teach is how do you engage with people outside of that circle to grow your sense of social capital. So then when you go to your football game with your kid, right, and your kid is playing next to so-and-so's kid from Minnetonka, guess what? There's a lot of social capital sitting in those stands that you can engage with, right? So if you now are sitting with someone in poverty and you're building this relationship, guess what? You have a lot of social capital, and you can offer some of that social capital in relationships with the people that you know. And so we had a family, a woman who had a similar injury and didn't have the resources to be able to go to medical care. And so we had social capital. We know someone who helped start TRIA. We reached out to him. He said, send me the x-rays. We connected with them in an informal way. She was able to get a whole lot of care because of that social capital, right? And it's not something that we tend to think of. We go, okay, I'm going to scoop this and put it on a plate and feel like I've done my diligence and service, as opposed to I'm going to walk a relationship with a family and then offer a new resource to them. Okay, so we're not about solving problems, but about helping.
Journey through the highs and the lows. I think this has been the longevity piece that I just humbly am in awe of, that because of the years, I've gotten to experience the successes, but also just the really, really hard things that people have gone through. And I'm going to just explain one situation that is one of many. There was a girl that moved from California to Maple Hill. She had a relative that lived there. Her and her parents moved here. And it was supposed to be a short-term situation, and it ended up being longer than they expected. And she moved here, didn't really know anyone, and just slowly, after many conversations, I could tell she wasn't doing very good. So one day I knocked at her house, and her mom came to the door. And her mom does not speak any English, and she just kind of pointed to this bedroom door. And I'm like, okay. And this is where I just go, man, this is when it gets really intimate. I'm walking into their house, I'm opening a bedroom door, I'm seeing where her parents sleep in a small bed in this little bedroom. And this high school student is not on a twin bed, she's on a toddler mattress that is tucked in this corner. It's a dark room. She is in a ball with the covers over her head, and I am seeing boxes and clothes and tools stacked up to the ceiling, just taking over this room because that's where they have to store this. And I am overwhelmed with this situation. And I am just like, Jesus, you gotta help me. And I just kneel down and I take a corner of that toddler mattress and I try to talk to her. What am I gonna do? How do I show love? Slowly, the covers come down and I saw hollowness in her eyes. She had no hope. It was a level of depression I've not seen before. And I just keep talking to her, and I start reminding her of who she is. And I say, we gotta get out of this house. Can I take you to Starbucks? And I will leave as soon as you say, please bring me back. And she agrees. She agrees to go to Starbucks with me. And as we sit there, I just start to see a little more energy in her. I see her engaging more. And then she actually ends up beyond Starbucks. She ends up doing more with me. And I start engaging with her more and more and more. And it was a journey, you guys. It was a long journey. And then all of a sudden she ends up at our doorstep in an emergency kind of situation. And that night she needs a place to stay. And she brought our cat. My husband's allergic to cats. I didn't turn around when I realized she was going to stay and she brought her cat. I'm like, we'll deal with that one later. But she ended up staying overnight. And we started just unfolding the story and realizing she couldn't go home at that point in her life. It was not a good solution, and she had no one else. And so she ended up moving in with us, and I drove around the Twin Cities with her hours on hours, listening to Taylor Swift and crying. And I'm just like, okay, so I know more about Taylor Swift than I'd ever hoped to. But it was weird.
I actually have a playlist in my truck of Taylor Swift now, thanks to Myra.
Yeah. So anyways, but we walked a lot of lows with her, and it looked like she was not going to graduate. And we just kept walking with her, encouraging her, and just supporting her. And we were able to walk that high with her and watch her graduate. And it was very, very powerful. And Father's Day, you want to share about that?
Yeah, so during that time, those number of months that she was living with us, we just did life, right? So I would come down and I would make dinner, and she'd be there doing her homework, and so we would just sit and talk. And as we began, one time I was talking with her, and I was just talking about life, and we went back and forth, and she just stopped, and she said, I saw her face change, and I said to myself, did I say something that I shouldn't have said? Did I say something that hurt or something like that? And so I asked her that, and she said, no, I've just never done this before. And I said, what do you mean? You've never done this before? We've never sat around the table and talked and ate dinner together, right? Then I taught her how to drive, and I taught her, we went and looked at jobs, and we looked at colleges and did all these types of things together. And then Father's Day, Father's Day comes, and it come and went, right? And that following Monday, she comes up to me at the Hope Center, and she gives me a card, and I didn't know what it was, and I went home and opened up the card. And she says in the card, thank you for, and then she starts naming these things, teaching me how to drive, teaching me what it means, all this stuff. And then finally she says, thank you for teaching me what it means to be a present father, right? Now, we share with you this story. We're going to skip that whole next section. Because what we are encouraging you to do is when God encourages us to walk alongside people in relationship, it's not about checking things off a list. It's about changing you and walking with someone that is going through life, in the messes of life, right? What did Jesus do? He got down in the mud with people. He didn't just come and offer his support. He encouraged his disciples to walk alongside people, and we go, oh, aren't we great if we choose to do that? And that's not the goal. The goal is, if you do that, you get to experience some of the stories that we have. Jill and I could literally tell you stories from now until next Thursday about different people and different ways in which God has chosen to show up and work in the lives of people. The only way you get to experience those things is if you choose to step into the messiness of relationship and get beyond good intentions, get beyond the to-do lists of service, and get engaged. Now, some of you are seniors, and you're going, well, I don't know, how much, do I have to, how can I do that? That is not something for you to ask. If you're above ground and still sucking in some oxygen, God has still more to do for and with you. And relationships and wisdom and time that you bring to that relationship is so, so important. So, last thing we're going to talk about is benevolent attachments, the last thing on this list, and then we're going to open it up for questions, because you said you wanted 15 minutes of that. If we are doing this right, it's difficult. It's painful, as you see. The only way that you can survive that is by turning over the totality of that every day to the only place it belongs, which is with Jesus Christ. John Eldredge wrote his most recent book called Resilient. Highly, highly recommend it. It has saved us tremendously over the last year in particular. And as a part of that book, he teaches about benevolent detachment, and that is the concept of you coming to Jesus, not in it's in a way that says, Lord, you are the only one that can handle this. I am not built for this. Our souls are not built for the way the world is right now. And that's okay, because he's in charge. And so if we're able to figure out ways to connect with him and turn these relationships, these individuals, turning over the lives that we are walking alongside over to Jesus, he's the one that can fix it anyway. We can't. And so my encouragement to you is to step into these things, even though they're hard, to work through the hardness of it, and then as you're doing it, turn that over to Jesus repeatedly. So, we had a lot more to cover, but we knew that this would happen. We get into stories and stuff. So we want to open it up for questions, and I will get back to that. I'll leave this up. This is any way that you can get in contact with us if you want to get engaged with us or other organizations we connect you with, and this is ways you can get involved. And while that's up, what kind of questions might you have for either of us?
Yeah, fantastic just to hear how God uses people who are willing to step into something and into the Dejewski's lives and put all that together. God called them. They stepped into something. They said yes to one and led to something else, but it changed so many things in their lives and the lives of the people around them. So, as Brian said, what are some questions? And I took the mic so I can come back because it's being recorded. They can hear the question, and I'll give it back to you if you need answer.
In these stories, how many of these people are led to Christ as far as the church goes?
We get this question a lot, and this is the messiness. We get this question a lot from churches, and I think Jesus has shown me a very different way of doing the gospel. It is about the decision, but I have learned I have to really leave that to the Holy Spirit at work in their life. And at first it was the approach of, I want the decision, that's my goal, and they sense that. People sense if you're coming with an agenda, I want to save you. And there are a ton of amazing believers in the park, and I think a lot of times people forget that they're there and they love Jesus too. And then there's some other people that have really been hurt by the church or so-called Christians, and they've seen a side of people representing Jesus that Jesus has never said, this is who I am. And so it's walking with them closely, and hopefully they take that next step. I can't give you a number, but I can tell you there's been some amazing, powerful conversations. We've done IF gathering tables. That has been amazing with some of the moms in the park. I lead a group of middle school and high school students that many of them have made that decision. We take kids up to Trout Lake Camp, and so that's part of their journey with faith. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, for a clarity point of view, about 10% of what we do programming-wise is explicitly faith-based, meaning that the gospel might be presented, the VBS that we do, you're singing Christian worship songs, we are presenting the gospel in a traditional sense. And then 90% of what we do is doing the journey and walking alongside of individuals. And what we found is that through that, we are able to reach, if I was to share with you some of the stories of groups that I have sat with and individuals and what they bring to that table and the rawness of who those people are, it would make your hair curl. But it is because we approach it the way we do. So to answer your question, we don't have a number. We don't keep track of that as a number. We make sure that we have intentional opportunities for them to hear the gospel, and then we make sure that as we're doing the other 90%, that we constantly bring bring this story back to Jesus, as Jesus being the source of strength, being the sense of power. We were going to talk about this actually, and that was the fact that we do incorporate that into everything. We always bring back that. And those that do choose to engage in the faith piece in addition to the services piece are much more deeply affected, and that's why we constantly return to that, right? He's the source of strength and power.
That's great.
Good question.
We get to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and he deals with the heart. Yes.
When you talk about resources, I'm wondering, like for us, resources, you know, people are spring cleaning. Are you talking about bikes and clothing and kitchen stuff, you know, that type of thing? Is there a place there for that?
So when a lot of people come to Mobile Hope and offer resources like those. We'll direct people to where that makes the most sense. So we have like Cross Food Shelf does a lot of those items that are needed, clothing, food. We work with Free Bikes for Kids to be able to do the bikes and guitars and other things that he's involved with. We do a variety of things like that, but we generally work with partners to provide that. When I talk about resources and when I encourage people to learn about 11 different resources, I would encourage you to tap into an organization or a book called Bridges Out of Poverty. And if you read Bridges Out of Poverty, you'll be able to walk through some of those things. As I said, I'm a certified trainer for that. I could come and share about those things. But it's helping people to understand that they can build on things besides just stuff and money. So for example, understanding that there are hidden rules in each class. So there are hidden rules of poverty, hidden rules of the middle class, and hidden rules of wealth. That if you know those hidden rules, you will behave very differently and you will be able to get ahead, versus if you don't know those rules, you're behaving in a way that you don't even realize are contrary to the rules of the environment you're in. And so learning those helps you that's a resource you can advance, and there's other resources as well. Thank you for that.
I'm coming.
Just a personal question, since you're married, you give and give and give to a lot of people, and in other relationships, some people work and do different things. What are a few things that you two do to strengthen your personal relationship in marriage and encourage other people? Tell us a few hints about relationships that you've learned.
Great question.
Getting this available so that we can just pass this back and forth.
Oh, you're just passing off the opportunity
We'll just pass
to somebody else.
Yeah.
Husband
I can't answer this question.
Oh, that's great.
You're picking this up? We've been so blessed to be able to work together. We just said this right before we came in. We were out in the truck before we walked in the door. We were able to grasp hands and pray with each other, and say, here we're walking into this, and we do this every day together. So we have had to be intentional about learning what that looks like. Jill and I are very different, as you probably can tell.
100% opposites.
As far as our styles, our working styles and all of that. And so it's about appreciating one another. It's about pressing into and giving each other the room we need. It is about making our faith first and paramount, and giving each other space to be able to go and experience God in our own ways, and then come back together again. And then it is a lot about what we talked about earlier, benevolent detachment and turning things over to Christ in a regular way. What would you have to add?
I think it's finding things that we can do together, but things that we can do separate. Because working together and doing ministry together, pickleball it's God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, pickleball. No, family, then pickleball. That's actually helped a lot to just have some things that we can do separate, and then do. You teach pickleball? We'll talk. So I think just being intentional with the marriage, because ministry and family can just suck everything out of you. So we have to really make it a priority to step away from that and do us and make sure we're doing okay and that we're just not busy doing stuff. So God has taught us a lot in that rhythm.
Well, I think we're going to end with questions here, just to get some end time here. Thank you so much for opening our eyes to the things that you do and the heart of what you do then. Powerful life lessons. And you get to live that out and to see that. And so appreciate that so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's just say thanks to them and for being with us. A couple of other things coming up. On your way out today, picked up a schedule of events, the Lunch and Learn's coming up. Well, there are a couple changes beginning in May that will be happening. May 2nd, we have a change there. Todd Mulliken, who comes on a regular basis, Todd is going to be with us on May 2nd, talking about knowing the difference between passive assertive and passive aggressive and aggressive communication, all right? Be here! No, something like that, yeah. But he's going to come and take that opportunity. And then on May 16th, Willard Harley. Willard Harley has written a book called His Needs and Her Needs. It was written back when I was in college, and we had to read it as a textbook. Had no idea how good that was going to be. And it's a book that talks about relationships and relationships as not only husband and wife, but just who we are as individuals, his needs and her needs. And it's been one of the top 100 books on marriage and relationships since 1978. And it's because that's when I took the course. I knew it was written right after that. But he was a professor that I had in college, but over the years has just been an impactful person. Delighted to have Willard Harley come and join us for that gathering, Lunch and Learn gathering on the 16th of May. And encourage you to come, as most all of you do almost every week. And so grateful for that. And so pick one of these up, grab it out of your basket there, and take that with you with those two changes and adjustments on that. Also in those baskets are some cards, some evaluation cards. You can leave us some information about that. What this day has been like, but also things we can do, or give us names of speakers and some of the rest of those things. We had a familiar gentleman walk in later, so Brian, good to have you here with us today, and appreciate all that you do to make this happen. But thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll see you before next Thursday, but have a great day.